What if the woman you risked everything to protect was hiding a life powerful enough to change yours forever? At 1:17 in the morning, inside a rain-soaked Pittsburgh diner, Ethan Cole saw a wealthy stranger tighten his hand around a young waitress's wrist. Everyone else looked away. Ethan didn't. He was a broke, widowed father working multiple jobs just to keep a roof over his daughter's head. She looked like an ordinary waitress trying to survive another night shift. But nothing about that moment was ordinary. Because Ethan had no idea the woman he was protecting was actually Claire Bennett, the CEO of a billion-dollar company living under a false name. And before this night is over, one act of courage will cost him almost everything. Stay with this story because what follows is about dignity, sacrifice, fatherhood, and the kind of love that begins when someone chooses not to look away. If you believe courage still matters, like this video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. 45 minutes earlier, Ethan Cole had been nobody worth noticing. That was how most people would have seen him anyway. A tired man in a faded work jacket sat alone in the last booth beside the window of the Blue Lantern Diner, his shoulders slightly rounded beneath the weight of a day that had started before sunrise and still had several hours left in it. Outside, Pittsburgh disappeared beneath cold November rain. Water streamed down the glass in crooked silver lines. Headlights moved across the wet street like pale ghosts stretching over the pavement before vanishing beneath the old railroad bridge at the end of the block. Beyond it, the dark shape of the Monongahela River cut through the city, carrying reflected pieces of downtown light toward places Ethan did not have time to think about. Inside the diner, an old ceiling vent rattled every 30 seconds. The coffee was too bitter. The vinyl seat beneath him had a crack running through the middle. Ethan liked the place anyway. Nothing at the Blue Lantern expected anything from him. He could sit down, drink coffee, breathe for 20 minutes, and exist without being somebody's employee, somebody's customer, somebody's problem, or somebody's father. Though the last one never really stopped. His phone vibrated beside his coffee cup. Ethan looked at the screen. A voice message from Sophie. He picked up the phone and pressed play. His 8-year-old daughter's whisper filled one ear. "Dad, Mrs. Alvarez thinks I'm asleep, but technically she only told me to get into bed. She never said I had to be asleep." Ethan lowered his head, trying not to smile. Sophie continued. "Also, my volcano is finished. I used too much red paint, so now it looks like it already exploded. I think that's more realistic." A pause. "And I still think Pluto should be a planet." Another pause. "Good night. Love you." Ethan listened to the message twice. Then he set the phone face down on the table. Across from him sat a small spiral notebook. The cover had once been black. Years of being shoved into glove compartments, toolboxes, coat pockets, and kitchen drawers had turned the edges gray. Ethan opened it. Every bill for the month was written in block letters. Rent, $12.40. Electric, $118. Gas, $76. Groceries, $410. Car insurance, $147. Sophie school trip, $35. Dance shoes, $62. Dentist, $90. He ran a finger beneath the numbers. The calculation was already there. He had done it that morning, then again during lunch, then again in the van while waiting outside a medical clinic. At the bottom of the page he had written, "Balance after bills, $83. Ethan stared at the number. $83. Enough to feel like something until a tire blew out. Enough until Sophie got sick. Enough until the furnace made another sound it was not supposed to make. He closed the notebook. "You're going to hurt yourself doing that." Ethan looked up. The waitress stood beside the table holding a glass coffee pot. Her name tag said MIA. She wore a pale blue uniform with white trim and had her dark blonde hair tied into a practical ponytail. No jewelry except for a cheap silver watch. No polished makeup. No perfume strong enough to survive diner grease and coffee. She nodded toward his notebook. "Doing what?" "Staring at numbers like they're going to get embarrassed and change." Ethan glanced down. "I was trying intimidation." "How's that working?" They remained defiant. Mia lifted the coffee pot. "Refill." He looked at the cup. "I haven't finished this one." "You've been sitting with it for 20 minutes. I'm pacing myself. Refills are free." "I know." She waited. Ethan took a sip from the lukewarm coffee. "I'm trying to make the first cup emotionally last." For half a second she looked surprised. Then she laughed. Not the automatic laugh service workers gave customers because smiling was part of the job. A real one. Quiet, brief, and a little tired. That's the saddest financial strategy I've heard all week. You haven't seen my retirement plan. I don't want to. She filled his cup. Fresh pot. You're trying to spoil me. Don't get used to it. Mia moved away. Ethan watched her cross behind the counter. He had been stopping at the Blue Lantern for a little over 2 months now, usually after his evening maintenance shift and before a late delivery pickup or between weekend repair jobs when he needed somewhere warm enough to sit without buying a full meal. Mia worked 4 of the nights he usually came in. He knew small things about her. She hated the meatloaf. She always checked the coffee lids twice before handing them to truck drivers. She corrected the cook when he put pickles on a plate after somebody asked for none. She remembered which elderly customers needed sugar substitutes. She never looked at her phone during a shift, and she spoke differently from everyone else who worked there. Not better, just more carefully. Like words had once mattered enough in her life for somebody to teach her exactly how to use them. Ethan had noticed. He had never asked. People carried things. He had learned that early. Sometimes asking about them was kindness. Sometimes leaving them alone was kinder. A metal tray hit the floor near the kitchen. The sound cracked through the diner. Ethan's body reacted before his mind did. His shoulders locked. His breath stopped. The room disappeared for one fractured second beneath white desert light. Dust. A radio screaming somewhere behind him. A concussive impact deep enough to move through bone. Then he was back. Chrome counter. Coffee. Rain. A waitress picking silverware off the floor. Ethan pressed his thumb and forefinger against the edge of the table. 5 things. Window. Sugar dispenser. Red ketchup bottle. Clock. Mia. 4 things he could feel. Wet sock against his heel. Wood grain beneath his fingertips. The ache in his right shoulder. Cool air from the ceiling vent. 3 things he could hear. Rain. Coffee machine. Low conversation from the cook. His breathing slowed. Mia had stopped near the register. Her eyes met his. She had seen it. Ethan braced for the expression he knew too well, concern mixed with discomfort. The look people gave when they wanted to ask whether he was okay but were afraid the answer might become their responsibility. Mia simply picked up a clean mug. She turned away. No questions. No pity. Ethan exhaled. His phone lit up again. This time it was a calendar reminder. Therapy. Friday, 4:00 p.m. He dismissed the notification. The chain beneath his shirt had shifted when he flinched. Ethan reached inside his collar and tucked it back beneath the fabric. A plain gold wedding ring hung from it. Rebecca's ring. 5 years. Sometimes that number felt impossible. 5 years since hospital rooms that always smelled too clean. 5 years since Sophie had fallen asleep curled against his side while a television played silently across from Rebecca's bed. 5 years since doctors had started speaking to him with that careful gentleness that meant nobody wanted to use the word dying. Rebecca had fought ovarian cancer for 14 months. Ethan had seen men survive things overseas that should have killed them. He had seen medics hold bodies together long enough to get helicopters into the air. For most of his adult life, he had believed enough discipline, enough force, enough refusal to quit could change an outcome. Cancer had taught him otherwise. There had been nothing to fight, nothing he could threaten, nothing he could carry away from her. He could only sit beside the bed and hold her hand while the strongest person he knew became quieter every day. After she died, Ethan had tried very hard to become someone else. He drank, stopped sleeping, stopped answering calls. He told himself he was functioning because Sophie still got breakfast most mornings, and her clothes were mostly clean. Then came the bar fight. A stranger had bumped into him. Ethan did not even remember the first punch. He remembered waking inside a holding cell with blood dried over 2 knuckles. Rebecca had been dead 3 months. Sophie had been waiting with Mrs. Alvarez. He came home the next morning expecting questions. Instead, Sophie stood in the kitchen in mismatched pajamas and stared at him. She was 3 years old. Her hair was tangled across one side of her face. She asked something Ethan never forgot. "If Mommy's gone and you're sad all the time, who takes care of you?" He had no answer. That frightened him more than the jail cell. 2 weeks later, Ethan walked into his first therapy appointment. He hated it. He almost never returned. Then he thought about Sophie's question. So he went back. Again. Again. Eventually, he learned that surviving something and living after it were two different skills. Neither came automatically. Behind the counter, Mia wiped down the same section twice. Her attention was not on the counter. It was on Ethan's expression. He caught her looking. Coffee crisis. She raised an eyebrow. I was about to ask you the same thing. I'm fine. You look like you're arguing with somebody who's not here. Ethan looked toward the rain. Old argument. Winning. Depends on the day. Mia nodded like she understood more than he had said. She reached beneath the counter and placed a small plate beside his cup. A slice of apple pie. Ethan looked at it. I didn't order that. Kitchen made one too many. That sounds suspicious. It is suspicious. I can't take free pie. You can. Mia, she leaned closer. If you make me throw away apple pie, I'm going to consider it a personal attack. He studied her for a moment, then pulled the plate closer. Fine. Thank you. I'm doing this for you. Very noble. He took a bite. It was better than the coffee. Mia moved toward another customer. The truth was that there had been no extra slice. Claire Bennett had paid for it herself. Not that anyone in the Blue Lantern knew her by that name. 4 months earlier, Claire had lived 40 stories above downtown Pittsburgh in a condominium where the windows did not open and the kitchen appliances cost more than some people's cars. Her mornings began with schedules prepared by assistants. Her transportation arrived before she reached the lobby. Meetings waited on screens. Security waited outside elevators. People rose when she entered rooms. At 30 years old, Claire Bennett was Chief Executive Officer of Bennett Systems, a technology company founded by her father 3 decades earlier. It employed more than 17,000 people across logistics, industrial software, warehouse automation, and workplace safety systems. Her name appeared in financial newspapers. Her photograph appeared beside articles discussing leadership, innovation, succession, and wealth. None of that followed her into the Blue Lantern. Here people snapped their fingers when they wanted coffee. They left coins under ketchup bottles. They complained when eggs were too soft. They called her honey. Some never looked at her face long enough to remember it. Claire had never felt more anonymous. She had also never learned so much. The idea began during a product meeting. 12 executives sat around a polished conference table discussing a new workforce safety platform. A presentation covered the wall. Charts, user flows, performance metrics, predictions. One senior executive clicked through a slide. Hourly workers prioritize efficiency. Claire looked up. How many hourly workers did we interview? The man paused. Our research team surveyed managers at 23 facilities. Claire waited. How many workers? Another executive glanced at his notes. We collected management feedback from each location. That wasn't my question. Silence. Claire leaned back. How many people who actually use this system for 8, 10, 12 hours a day did we speak to? No one answered. That afternoon, she visited one of Bennett Systems' regional distribution centers without the usual tour. No announcement, no executive host, no branded jacket. Daniel Price, her head of security, remained outside. Claire spent 40 minutes watching workers use equipment designed by people sitting in rooms like the one she had left. One scanner required workers to remove gloves every time the touchscreen froze. A safety menu used lettering too small to read from standing distance. A reporting tool required 7 screens to document an incident. Near the loading dock, 2 workers struggled with a malfunctioning handheld terminal. One slapped the side of it. People who build this stuff have never worked a 12-hour shift in their lives. His coworker laughed. Claire did not. That sentence followed her home. It followed her into meetings, into dinner, into bed. 3 days later, she walked into her father's study. Walter Bennett sat behind a desk built from a single slab of walnut. He listened while Claire explained the plan. When she finished, he removed his glasses. No, Claire folded her hands. I wasn't asking permission. You are the chief executive of a public company. Exactly. You cannot disappear into hourly jobs like you're conducting some college sociology experiment. I'm not disappearing. You want to use another name, because if people know who I am, they'll behave differently. Walter stared at her. People behave differently around power. Welcome to civilization. That's the problem. The argument lasted nearly 2 hours. Claire wanted 6 months. No company driver, no executive apartment, no corporate credit card for daily expenses, no security detail hovering within sight. Walter wanted her surrounded by protection. They compromised. Daniel would know where she lived. Claire would check in twice a day. She would carry an emergency device. Her corporate phone would remain available but unused unless necessary. She rented a small studio apartment in Southside Flats, bought groceries herself, started taking the bus. Then she applied for service jobs using the name Mia Carter. The Blue Lantern hired her because one waitress had quit with 12 hours' notice. Her first shift nearly killed her feet. Her second taught her that carrying 4 plates at once was harder than most quarterly earnings calls. Her third taught her that kindness from strangers felt different when nobody expected anything in return. By the end of the first month, Claire could tell when truck drivers had been awake too long. She knew which customers counted change before ordering. She learned that nurses coming off night shifts often wanted silence more than conversation. She learned that people did not report workplace problems because reporting them could create new problems. She learned that bad design was not merely inconvenient. Sometimes bad design cost somebody 10 minutes. Sometimes it cost somebody dignity. Sometimes it made an unsafe job more dangerous. And she learned about Ethan Cole. He never flirted with her, never asked for her number, never tried to impress her. He said please even when exhausted. He stacked his dishes near the edge of the table before leaving. Once he saw the counter stool wobbling while an older customer sat on it. Ethan returned the following night with 2 screws and a small wrench. Claire watched him kneel beside the stool. "You work here now?" "No." "Then why are you fixing it?" He tightened the loose bracket. "Because it was bothering me." "The owner could pay somebody." "Then he can pay me retroactively." She laughed. Ethan stood. "You always repair things that aren't yours." He considered the question. "Depends what's broken." Claire had thought about that answer more than she wanted to admit. She told herself Ethan interested her because he was exactly the kind of person Bennett Systems executives talked about without knowing. A worker, a veteran, a parent, a person who measured purchases in hours worked instead of percentages gained. That explanation remained convincing until she started noticing when his truck pulled into the parking lot, until she began putting on fresh coffee around the time he usually arrived, until she caught herself smiling when the bell over the door rang and he walked in. It was not romance. Claire did not allow herself to call it that. It was curiosity. That was what she told herself. Across the diner, Ethan finished the pie. He checked the time. 12:39 a.m. "I need my check." Claire brought it over. "You're leaving." "Warehouse pickup." "You already work today." "Unfortunately, my creditors remain deeply committed to capitalism." Claire handed him the receipt. "How many jobs do you have?" Ethan looked at her. "Enough." "That doesn't sound healthy." "It isn't permanent." "How long has it not been permanent?" He folded the receipt. "Couple years." Claire leaned against the booth. "You ever get a day off?" "Sunday afternoon." "That's oddly specific." "Sophie has dance in the morning. I visit my wife after." Claire's expression changed. Ethan realized how the sentence sounded. "My wife passed away." "I'm sorry." 5 years. Claire nodded. No automatic reassurance. No painful question. Just a quiet, sincere, "I'm sorry." Ethan looked toward the window. "So am I." The bell over the front door chimed. Cold air entered first, then 3 men. Claire straightened. Ethan barely looked up. The man leading the group wore a charcoal suit beneath an expensive wool coat. Mid-40s, perfect haircut, a steel watch visible beneath his cuff. He moved through the diner with the relaxed confidence of somebody who assumed rooms adjusted themselves when he entered them. Claire knew him instantly. Grant Whitmore. Her stomach tightened. Grant's investment group held a significant position connected to Bennett Systems. He had attended corporate dinners, sat across conference tables from her, once sent an absurdly expensive bottle of wine to her office after she approved a deal that benefited one of his funds. Claire had always found him polished, aggressive, smug, but manageable. Grant looked directly at her now. Nothing, no recognition. His gaze moved over her uniform name tag and apron. To Grant, Whitmore, Claire Bennett had disappeared. Mia Carter was standing in her place. One of the men with Grant laughed too loudly as they entered. The other looked uncomfortable. Grant had been drinking. Claire could see it now. Not stumbling drunk, something worse. His movements remained controlled, but the edges had disappeared. The careful social mask was thinner. He dropped into a booth. Coffee. Claire reached for her order pad. Sure, anything to eat? Grant looked around the diner. This place serves food. His friend laughed. Claire did not. Kitchen's open. Coffee, black, fresh. I'll start a new pot. She turned. Grant spoke behind her. Wait. Claire stopped. He looked at her name tag. Mia. Yes. Grant smiled. That your real name? Her pulse changed, only slightly. That's what the tag says. The nervous friend looked down. Grant smiled wider. I like you. Claire had heard versions of that sentence before, at galas, at investor dinners, in hotel bars after conferences. The difference was that those men usually knew exactly who her father was. This time, Grant believed she had nothing he needed. Claire set down the coffee. Anything else? Sit down. I'm working. For 2 minutes. No. Something cold moved through his eyes. He was not used to the word. Claire picked up the pot and turned toward the counter. Grant caught her wrist. Hard. The coffee sloshed inside the glass pot. For half a second, Claire did not understand what had happened. Then pain shot through her arm. She looked down at his hand. Grant smiled. What's the rush? Claire pulled once. He tightened his grip. Let go of me. The diner seemed to become quieter. At the booth by the window, Ethan Cole slowly lifted his eyes from the folded check in his hand. Ethan did not move immediately. That was the first thing Claire noticed. He did not leap from the booth. He did not shout. He did not pound his fist against the table or throw himself into the situation like a man looking for permission to become violent. He simply watched. Grant's fingers were locked around Claire's wrist. Her skin had already begun to whiten beneath his grip. Let go of me. Grant tilted his head. Relax. Claire pulled again. He held tighter. I'm talking to you. The man seated beside Grant Mason Keller stared into his coffee as if he had suddenly discovered something fascinating at the bottom of the cup. The younger man across from him shifted in his seat. Nobody said anything. Claire looked toward the counter. The cook turned back to the grill. A truck driver near the window lowered his eyes. An elderly couple whispered to each other and began collecting their coats. The silence did something worse than Grant's hand. It told him he could continue. Claire's voice hardened. I said let go. That was the second time. Ethan set his folded check on the table. Grant leaned toward Claire. You're making this dramatic. No. Her jaw tightened. You're making it simple. Grant smiled. Is that right? Claire looked directly at him. Let go of me. Now. The third time. Ethan rose. His right shoulder protested as he straightened. He ignored it. The chair legs scraped once against the floor. Mason looked over. The younger man noticed Ethan next. Grant did not. Ethan crossed the short distance between his booth and theirs. He stopped several feet away. She asked you to let go. Grant finally turned. His eyes moved over Ethan slowly. The worn jacket. The faded shirt beneath it. The calluses across his fingers. The boots darkened by rain. Grant's expression settled into mild irritation. Go sit down. Ethan's eyes dropped to Claire's wrist, then returned to Grant. She asked 3 times. Grant gave a short laugh. And this concerns you, how... Ethan's voice stayed level. The second somebody says no and you keep your hands on them, it concerns everyone in the room. Claire looked at Ethan. She had seen him tired. She had seen him smile at Sophie's voice messages. She had seen his hands shake once after a tray crashed in the kitchen. She had never seen this version of him. Still, focused, almost frightening because there was no anger visible in his face. Grant released Claire. For one heartbeat, it seemed finished. Claire stepped back. Her hand closed over her wrist. Then Mason stood. All right, tough guy. Ethan looked at him. "Sit down." Mason laughed. "You don't give orders here." "I just did." Mason reached for Ethan's shoulder. Everything happened quickly after that. Ethan shifted sideways. One hand caught Mason's wrist, the other controlled the elbow. Mason's momentum carried him forward. Ethan turned his arm, stepped behind him, and guided him down against the edge of the booth. The table shook. Coffee spilled. Mason cursed. Ethan held him there, not striking, not crushing, just controlling the movement. The younger man half rose. Ethan looked at him. "Don't." The man sat back down. Grant stared. Claire could hear the rain against the windows again. Ethan spoke close to Mason's ear. "Stop fighting me. Get off me. Stop fighting." Mason stopped. Ethan released him and stepped away. Mason immediately clutched his shoulder. "You broke my arm." "No, I didn't. You don't know that." "I do." Grant pulled out his phone. His face had changed. The arrogance remained. Now it had humiliation underneath it. "You have no idea what you just did." Ethan looked at him. "Yeah." Grant's thumb moved across his screen. "No." He looked at Ethan like he was studying an insect. "You ruined your life?" Ethan glanced at Claire. Red marks were rising around her wrist. "I stopped you." Grant raised the phone to his ear. "I'm calling the police." "Good." That answer seemed to disturb him more than resistance would have. Grant moved away from the table. "You assaulted my associate." Ethan nodded toward Claire. "You assaulted her." Grant laughed once. "That's not what happened." Claire stepped forward. "It is exactly what happened." Grant finally looked at her properly. For a second, Claire wondered whether recognition might come. It did not. He saw only a waitress, someone whose word could be weighed against his and discarded. Grant turned away. 3 men attacked by an unstable stranger in a diner. Ethan's eyes narrowed. 3? Grant spoke into the phone. "Yes." "There's been an assault." Claire looked around the room. At the cook. At the truck driver. At the elderly couple now frozen near the door. Everyone had seen it. Yet nobody looked certain anymore. That uncertainty frightened her. Not because the truth had changed, because she suddenly understood how quickly truth could become a contest between people with unequal power. Police lights appeared 11 minutes later. Red and blue moved across the wet windows. 2 patrol officers entered first. A third followed. Ethan stood near his booth with both hands visible. Grant approached the officers immediately. He spoke first. Of course he did. His voice had changed. Gone was the drunken entitlement. Now he sounded controlled, professional, offended. "My colleague was assaulted without provocation." Claire almost laughed. Instead, she said, "That's not true." One officer turned. Grant continued over her. "This man became aggressive. We tried to de-escalate." Ethan looked at Claire. She could see the warning in his eyes, not toward Grant, toward himself. He knew speaking while angry would help nobody, so he stayed silent. A lieutenant arrived several minutes later. His name was Thomas Mercer. Gray at the temples, heavy winter coat over his uniform. He listened without rushing anybody. Grant gave his version. Mason gave nearly the same one. The younger man, whose name turned out to be Colin Avery, avoided eye contact. Then Lieutenant Mercer spoke to Claire. "Your name?" She hesitated for less than a second. "Mia Carter." The false name sounded strange now. "Tell me what happened." Claire told him. Grant had stopped her. He had asked personal questions. She attempted to leave. He grabbed her wrist. She asked him to release her 3 times. Ethan intervened verbally. Grant let go. Mason moved toward Ethan. Ethan restrained him. Mercer looked at her wrist. "Can I see?" Claire uncovered it. The bruising was becoming darker. The lieutenant's expression changed. "Did he cause that?" "Yes." Grant spoke from behind him. "She is exaggerating." Mercer turned. "Sir, I'll speak with you again when I need to." Grant went quiet. The security camera should have solved everything. It did not. The Blue Lantern had one camera aimed toward the dining room. The equipment was old. The angle was too high. A reflected strip of neon light cut across the section where Grant and Claire had been standing. The recording clearly showed Ethan moving toward the table. It showed Mason rising. It showed the restraint. It did not clearly show Grant's hand around Claire's wrist. Mercer watched the recording twice. Then he interviewed the other customers. The elderly couple claimed they had not seen enough. The cook admitted there had been an argument, but said he had been working. A truck driver named Marcus Hill said quietly that Grant had touched Claire first. How? Mercer asked. Marcus hesitated. Grabbed her. Did you hear her tell him to stop? Marcus looked toward Grant. Grant's lawyer had already arrived. A black car had pulled up outside only minutes earlier. A man in a dark suit now stood beside Grant with one hand resting on a leather briefcase. Marcus looked back at Mercer. Yeah. How many times? Marcus swallowed. More than once. It was enough to complicate the story, not enough to end it. Grant wanted charges. His attorney wanted Ethan taken into custody. Lieutenant Mercer rubbed the bridge of his nose. Finally, he walked toward Ethan. Mr. Cole, I need you to come with us while we sort this out. Ethan nodded. Am I under arrest? Not at the moment. All right. Claire stepped closer. This is wrong. Mercer looked at her. I'm not saying he did anything wrong. I'm saying there is an allegation of assault, and I have conflicting statements. Grant's attorney watched with calm satisfaction. Ethan reached for his phone. I need to call someone about my daughter. Mercer nodded. Ethan walked toward the far end of the diner. Claire watched him dial. A woman's sleepy voice answered first. Mrs. Alvarez. Ethan apologized for waking her, asked whether Sophie was still asleep. Then Mrs. Alvarez said something. Ethan closed his eyes. Sophie wants to talk to me. A pause. Yeah, put her on. His posture softened. Hey, Peanut. Claire could not hear Sophie's first words. Ethan turned slightly toward the window. No, everything's okay. Another pause. I know what time it is. He listened. A tired smile appeared. I had to help somebody. Claire looked down at her wrist. The smile faded from Ethan's face as Sophie asked another question. Did it work? Ethan looked across the diner. Their eyes met. I think so. He ended the call several minutes later. Claire approached him. I'm sorry. Ethan frowned. For what, For this. Then she nodded toward the officers. Ethan looked genuinely confused. You didn't grab yourself. If you hadn't stepped in, he would have kept going. Claire said nothing. Ethan studied the marks around her wrist. You okay? She stared at him. You're being taken to a police station because of me, and you're asking if I'm okay. You're the one with fingerprints on your arm. Something inside Claire tightened. Before she could answer, Mercer called Ethan's name. Ethan picked up his jacket. Claire stepped closer. I'll give another statement. Good. I'll make sure they know exactly what happened. Ethan nodded. Tell the truth. Claire almost said, I can do more than that. She stopped herself. She had made an agreement. 6 months. No using her identity to control outcomes. No running back to the machinery of Bennett systems every time ordinary life became uncomfortable. But as she watched Ethan walk into the rain beside 2 police officers, the agreement suddenly felt childish. This was no longer an experiment. At the station, Ethan spent the first hour beneath fluorescent lights that made everyone look guilty. Grant arrived 15 minutes later. His attorney stayed at his side. Ethan sat alone. He had missed the warehouse pickup. That meant losing the night's pay, possibly the entire route. He checked his phone. 2 missed calls from his supervisor. 1 message. Call me ASAP. Ethan rubbed his face. A woman entered the waiting area carrying a canvas bag and a dented travel mug. She wore a navy blazer over a white blouse and looked like she had dressed in under 5 minutes. Dark hair tied loosely behind her head. She scanned the room. Ethan Cole. He raised his hand. She walked toward him. Natalie Reyes. She sat down. I'm your attorney. Ethan blinked. I don't have an attorney. You do tonight. Who called you? A Veterans Legal Aid Network. I didn't call anybody. Then somebody likes you. Ethan looked toward Grant. I doubt it's him. Natalie followed his gaze. Grant's lawyer was speaking quietly beside a vending machine. Grant Whitmore. You know him. I know the type. Ethan leaned back. Expensive. Very. Natalie opened her bag. You have 2 problems. Only 2. 1, Grant Whitmore has money. She removed a legal pad. 2, Grant Whitmore has friends who have money. Ethan considered that. Feels like one very expensive problem. Natalie looked at him for a second, then smiled. Good, you still have a sense of humor. Barely. She reviewed what happened. Ethan answered every question. No embellishment, no pretending he had felt less anger than he did. When Natalie asked why he intervened, Ethan shrugged. She told him to let go. 3 times. 3. You knew Whitmore? No. You knew the waitress? I knew her first name. Mia Carter. That's what her tag said. Natalie wrote it down. Did she ask you to intervene? No. Then why did you... Ethan looked at her. Would it matter if she asked? Natalie stopped writing. No. Then that's why. At 3:30 in the morning, Ethan was released while the investigation remained open. Natalie walked him outside. Rain had become mist. Go home. I have work. She looked at him. It's 3:30. My maintenance shift starts at 6. Mr. Cole. Ethan. Ethan, you just spent half the night at a police station. Rent doesn't care. Natalie stared at him, then handed him a card. Call me before you talk to anyone about this. Anyone. Police reporters? Whitmore's lawyer. Anybody who suddenly wants to be your friend. Ethan put the card in his pocket. Reporters. Natalie looked toward the street. You restrained a man connected to Grant Whitmore. That doesn't sound like news. It shouldn't. She met his eyes. That doesn't mean it won't become news. By 8 that morning, someone had posted the video. Ethan did not know. He was beneath a sink in an office building, replacing a corroded valve when his phone began vibrating on the tile floor. He ignored it. It vibrated again, then again. By the 5th call, he slid out from beneath the sink. His supervisor's name filled the screen. Mike, where are you? Finishing the 3rd floor restroom. A pause. Have you seen the internet? Ethan sat up. No. You need to. The video lasted 37 seconds. It began with Mason standing. Then Ethan moved. Mason hit the booth. Ethan controlled his arm. The angle made the movement look violent. There was no footage of Grant holding Claire. No sound of her telling him to stop. No warning from Ethan. Only the takedown. The caption read, Former soldier attacks businessman during late-night diner incident. Ethan watched it twice. Then his stomach dropped. Another post appeared beneath it. A photograph. His mugshot from 5 years earlier, the night after the bar fight. The caption called him a veteran with a history of violence. Someone had found his full name, then his military history, then references to his PTSD treatment. By 9:30, hundreds of strangers were discussing whether men like him should be allowed to work security-related jobs. By 10, the maintenance company asked him to leave the building. Just until this settles down, his supervisor stood beside the service van. Ethan stared at him. Mike, you know me. I do. You know how I work. I know. Then why am I leaving? Mike looked miserable. The client saw the video. What did you tell them? That there was more to it. And they don't want liability. Ethan gave a slow nod. Right. He removed the company keys from his pocket. Mike did not take them immediately. This is temporary. Ethan placed them in his hand. Sure. At 11:15, the medical equipment company called. His delivery route was suspended. At 1:30, a homeowner canceled a weekend repair. At 2, another. At 3:10, Ethan sat inside his truck outside Sophie's school with both hands resting on the steering wheel. His phone screen showed the same number he had written in his notebook the night before, $83. He turned the phone off before Sophie came out. She ran toward the truck carrying a backpack almost as large as her body. Dad? She climbed inside. You got me early. Thought I'd surprise you. She studied him. You look weird. Thank you. Not bad weird. Strong recovery? She buckled her seatbelt. Mrs. Grant gave us our science grades. How'd Pluto do? It is still oppressed. Ethan started the truck. For 10 minutes, Sophie talked about school. He listened. He asked questions. He almost convinced himself nothing had changed. Then Sophie became quiet. Dad. Yeah. Are you famous? His grip tightened around the wheel. Why? Tyler's mom showed him a video. Ethan looked straight ahead. What video? Sophie knew he knew. The one where you're fighting somebody. I wasn't fighting. Tyler said you attacked a man. No. She stared at him. Did you hurt somebody? Ethan pulled into an empty grocery store parking lot. He shut off the engine. Then he turned toward her. Yes. Sophie's face changed. Ethan continued before fear could settle there. I hurt somebody who was trying to hurt somebody else. Why, because he wouldn't stop. Did you tell him to? Yes. Did the lady tell him to? 3 times, Sophie thought. Then why do people say you're bad? Ethan looked through the windshield. Rainwater still clung to the glass from the night before. Because sometimes people see one piece of something and think they saw everything. That's dumb. It can be. Can you tell them? I'm trying. Sophie leaned back. Was the lady scared? Yeah. You helped her? Yeah. She looked at her father for a long moment. Then I don't care what Tyler's mom thinks. Ethan almost smiled. I appreciate the support. But Tyler is still annoying. That feels unrelated. It's not. At home, Ethan made grilled cheese and tomato soup. He checked email while Sophie worked on homework. 3 more repair cancellations. 1 message from the medical company saying the suspension could become permanent. Another from Natalie. Do not respond to any media requests. A reporter had already left a voicemail. Another wanted to know whether Ethan's PTSD contributed to the incident. That question stayed with him. Not because it was complicated, because it was insulting. For years, Ethan had worked to understand what his mind did after war. He had learned triggers, breathing, grounding, anger management, sleep routines. He had walked into therapy on days when every instinct told him to stay home. Now, strangers had taken the existence of that work and turned it into evidence that he was dangerous. Sophie stood in the kitchen doorway. Dinner smells burned. Ethan looked at the pan. Smoke curled from one side of the sandwich. That's because it is. You were looking at your phone. You're very observant. I get that from Mom. The words landed softly. Sophie did not realize it. Ethan did. He smiled. Yeah. He scraped the burned sandwich into the trash. You do. The next morning, Grant Whitmore learned who Mia Carter really was. His assistant entered his office carrying a tablet. Grant was standing near the windows with black coffee in one hand. He had slept 3 hours. His head still hurt. There's a problem. Grant did not turn. Everything is a problem before 9. This one is Claire Bennett. Grant looked back. His assistant placed the tablet on the desk. A photograph from the police report filled the screen. Claire, hair tied back, no makeup, blue diner uniform, the name Mia across her chest. Grant stared. He knew the face now. Of course he did. Claire Bennett, Chief Executive Officer of Bennett Systems, Walter Bennett's daughter. The woman he had seen at industry events for years. The woman whose company represented one of the most valuable relationships in his portfolio. Grant set down the coffee. When did you confirm this? 20 minutes ago. Who else knows? I don't know. Grant walked to his desk. Find out. His assistant hesitated. Grant. What? If she gives a public statement, she won't. How do you know? Grant stared at the image. Because powerful people hated scandal. Because boards hated uncertainty. Because companies worth billions did not want their chief executive discussing being grabbed by a drunk investor in a diner at 1 a.m. Because Walter Bennett would understand what was at stake. Grant knew that world. He knew how fear traveled through it. He knew how quickly principle became negotiation when enough money entered the room. The panic lasted perhaps 10 seconds. Then Grant sat down. Call communications. His assistant remained still. Now. Within hours, the story around Ethan changed again. Old articles about veteran mental health appeared in posts beside his photograph. Anonymous accounts claimed Ethan had seemed aggressive before the confrontation. The bar fight became evidence of a pattern. Grant's people never needed to say Ethan was unstable directly. They only needed to place the right facts close enough together and let strangers build the accusation themselves. Then came the civil complaint, assault, emotional distress, damages. Natalie dropped the documents onto Ethan's kitchen table 2 nights later. Sophie was asleep. Ethan stared at the number. They're serious. Very. I don't have this kind of money. They know. Then why ask for it? Pressure. Natalie opened another folder. They're also offering settlement. Ethan looked at her. How generous. $75,000. Silence. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a bus moved along the wet street. Natalie slid the agreement toward him. Ethan read. The amount looked unreal on paper. $75,000. Enough to pay rent for years. Enough to replace the truck before it died. Enough to put something away for Sophie's future. Enough to breathe. Then he reached the non-disclosure section. He read it twice. He looked at Natalie. If I sign this, I can't talk about what happened. Correct. Neither can Mia. This agreement only controls you, but it changes the story. Yes. Ethan looked back at the number. Natalie spoke carefully. Nobody would blame you for taking it. Ethan's fingers moved to the chain beneath his shirt. He pulled Rebecca's ring free and held it between his thumb and forefinger. For a moment, he pictured Sophie's piggy bank, the $12 she had not yet given him. He imagined not having to count groceries, not checking the gas gauge before every drive, not pretending the truck's transmission noise did not exist. Grant had found the exact point where dignity and survival became difficult to separate. Ethan set the papers down, then tore them in half. Natalie closed her eyes briefly. That was the original. You have copies. I do. He tore the pieces again. What should I tell them? Ethan looked at her. Tell them no. That's it. That's it. Natalie collected the pieces. They'll push harder. They already took my jobs. Money isn't the only pressure people like Grant understand. Ethan leaned back. What else is there? Natalie did not answer immediately. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. No text, only a photograph. Ethan opened it. Sophie stood outside her school, pink backpack, hair pulled into 2 uneven braids. She was laughing at something another child had said. The picture had been taken from across the street. Ethan stopped breathing. A second image arrived. Sophie outside the dance studio. A third, Sophie and Mrs. Alvarez walking toward their apartment building. Ethan stood so quickly the chair struck the wall. Natalie reached for the phone. Ethan? He was already moving. Where is she? She's asleep. Lock the door. It is locked. Check it. Ethan, check the door. Natalie did. Ethan stood in the center of the kitchen. His hands had curled into fists. His jaw ached from clenching it. Something old moved through him. Fast, hot, simple. Find Grant. End it. The thought felt frightening because of how clear it was. Ethan closed his eyes. He heard Sophie's voice. If Mommy's gone and you're sad all the time, who takes care of you? He opened his hands, one finger at a time. Natalie watched him. Ethan. He pulled out his phone. For several seconds he stared at the contacts, then pressed one. The therapist answered on the 4th ring. David. Ethan swallowed. It's Ethan. A pause. Tell me where you are. Home. Is Sophie safe? She's asleep. Good, tell me what's happening. Ethan looked at the photograph on the table. Somebody took pictures of my daughter. His voice cracked on the last word. Natalie looked away, giving him what little privacy the kitchen allowed. Ethan breathed, slowly, deliberately. He stayed on the phone. He did not leave the apartment. He did not drive toward Grant Whitmore's office. He did not become the man the headlines claimed he was. Across Pittsburgh, inside a glass conference room high above the river, Claire Bennett stared at the same photographs on a tablet. The color drained from her face. Her chief of staff stood beside her. We confirmed the images were distributed through accounts connected to a private investigation firm. Who hired them? We're still tracing payment. Claire looked at Sophie's face, 8 years old, laughing, completely unaware. Her fingers closed around the edge of the table. He protected me. Nobody spoke. Claire looked toward the city below. He didn't know my name. Her voice was low now. He didn't know who my father was. He didn't know what company I ran. He thought I was a waitress making tips at 1 a.m. She turned back toward the photographs. And Grant is doing this to his daughter because he stood up. Claire picked up her coat. Her chief of staff stepped forward. Where are you going? Claire walked toward the conference room door. To stop hiding. Claire did not go home. She went straight to Bennett Systems. By the time her car reached downtown, the rain had stopped, but Pittsburgh still looked washed in silver. Water clung to the streets. Office towers reflected red brake lights in long, trembling streaks. The rivers moved dark beneath the bridges. Claire sat in the back seat without speaking. For 4 months, she had avoided this route, avoided the private entrance, avoided the security gate that opened before her car slowed, avoided the lobby where people knew her name before she introduced herself. Now the glass doors opened and Claire Bennett walked inside. The effect was immediate. A receptionist stood. 2 employees near the elevator straightened. Someone whispered her name. Claire hated how quickly the room changed. At the Blue Lantern, she had carried coffee to men who never looked up. Here, people watched how she crossed a lobby. The difference made her skin crawl. Daniel Price was waiting near the private elevators. He wore a dark suit and the expression of a man who had not slept much. "You should have called me." "I did." "You called from the car." "That still counts." Daniel pressed the elevator button. "Your father is upstairs." "I know. He is not happy." Claire looked at the closing doors. "Neither am I." Walter Bennett was standing beside the windows of his study when Claire entered. He did not turn immediately. The room was quiet enough that she could hear the faint hum of the climate system. Her father had spent years building spaces where nothing unexpected happened. No ringing phones, no raised voices, no uncontrolled interruptions. Claire closed the door. Walter looked at her reflection in the glass. "You are done." Claire took off her coat. "No," he turned. "I'm not discussing this." "Then listen." Walter's jaw tightened. Claire placed the tablet on his desk. Sophie's photograph filled the screen. Walter looked down. "Who is the child?" "Ethan Cole's daughter." He studied the image. "Why do you have this?" "Because someone followed her." Walter looked up. Claire opened the next photograph. Sophie outside the dance studio. Then another. The apartment building. "Grant's people are trying to scare Ethan into silence. You know that." "I know a private intelligence firm connected to Grant distributed the images. We are tracing payment." Walter's expression hardened. "Daniel." Daniel stepped forward from near the door. "Already working on it." Walter looked back at Claire. "I told you this experiment was dangerous." Claire stared at him. "This is not happening because I worked in a diner. It happened because you placed yourself in an uncontrolled environment. Listen to yourself." Walter's eyes narrowed. "What exactly would you prefer I say? That Grant Whitmore put his hands on a woman who told him no?" Walter went still. "That a man with no reason to help me stood up while everybody else looked away?" Claire moved closer. "And now Grant is destroying his life because he can." Walter walked behind his desk. "We can handle Whitmore. Quietly, if necessary. With lawyers? Yes. With money. If that is what solves the problem." Claire laughed once. There was no humor in it. "You still do not understand." Walter's voice cooled. "I understand perfectly. You were assaulted. A civilian intervened. There is now legal exposure, media exposure, and personal risk." "A civilian." Claire repeated the word softly. "His name is Ethan. I know his name. Do you—" Walter met her eyes. Claire leaned forward. "He works every hour he can because he is raising an 8-year-old girl alone. His wife died. He has been in treatment for years because he came home from war carrying things none of us can see. He lost his jobs because Grant controlled a 30-second video." Walter said nothing. Claire pointed toward Sophie's photograph. "And when Ethan would not take the money, they moved on to his daughter." Walter's gaze returned to the tablet. His anger was quieter now. That made it more dangerous. "Where is Cole?" "At home. Security. Daniel arranged surveillance around the building." Walter looked toward Daniel. Daniel nodded. Walter walked to the window. "I want you out of this publicly." Claire stared at him. "No." He turned. "Claire, I am not hiding behind a company statement. Your position affects 17,000 employees. So does mine. Your personal life cannot become corporate policy. This is not my personal life." Her voice rose for the first time. "This is exactly the kind of thing our company claims to care about." Walter stepped closer. "We build systems. We build systems for people. I know what we build. No, we build presentations about people. We build reports about people. We sit in rooms where nobody has ever been afraid to lose a shift because they spoke up. Walter's face changed. Claire saw the anger first, then something else. Not agreement, recognition. She continued, I went into that diner because I wanted to understand what it feels like when your name does not protect you. Her eyes moved toward the tablet. I understand now. Walter was silent. Claire put on her coat again. Where are you going? To tell Ethan who I am? Walter looked almost surprised. He does not know. No, that seems relevant. It is. Walter's mouth tightened. You waited too long. Claire held his gaze. I know. Ethan was at Natalie Reyes's office when Claire arrived. The office occupied the second floor above a neighborhood pharmacy. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and old carpet. Nothing about the building announced power. Claire had spent most of her life walking into rooms built to impress people. Natalie's office seemed built to survive them. Boxes lined one wall. Legal folders covered half the conference table. A coffee machine in the corner looked old enough to vote. Natalie opened the door. Her eyes moved from Claire to Daniel, waiting farther down the hall. You brought security. Not by choice. Natalie looked at Claire's clothes, tailored coat, dark trousers, leather bag, then at her face. Something clicked. You are not Mia Carter. Claire shook her head. No. Natalie stepped aside. Ethan is going to love this. He was sitting at the table with a stack of employment forms in front of him. Applications. Claire recognized the humiliation before she understood the papers. He was applying for jobs, again, after losing work because he protected her. Ethan looked up. For 1 second, his expression softened automatically. Mia. Then he noticed the clothes, the car visible through the window, Daniel in the hall. His expression changed. Claire closed the door. My name is not Mia. Ethan leaned back. Natalie remained standing near the wall. Claire placed her hands on the chair across from him but did not sit. My name is Claire Bennett. Silence. Ethan looked at Natalie. Natalie lifted both hands. Do not look at me. This is new information. Ethan looked back at Claire. Bennett. Yes. He stared at her. Bennett Systems. Claire nodded. The company downtown. Yes. The one with the tower. Yes. Ethan gave a short breath that almost became a laugh. Of course, Claire swallowed. I am the chief executive. This time Ethan did laugh, once, quietly, not because anything was funny. He rubbed both hands over his face. Okay? Claire waited. Ethan looked at her again. Mia Carter does not exist. The name does, just not legally. That is not better. I know. How long? 4 months. You were working at the diner for 4 months while running Bennett Systems. I stepped back from most public operations. I still handled major decisions remotely. Ethan stared. Why? Claire began explaining. The workforce project, the product meeting, the warehouse workers, the research, the agreement with her father. Ethan listened without interrupting. That was worse than anger. When she finished, he looked at the job applications in front of him. Then he looked at her. You could have stopped this. Claire felt the words physically. I tried. No. Ethan's voice stayed controlled. You sent me a lawyer. Natalie is a very good lawyer. I know. Natalie raised one eyebrow. Ethan continued. You stayed invisible. Claire sat down. I thought keeping my identity out of it would protect the investigation. Protect who? Everyone. Ethan shook his head. That is not what happened. I know. My daughter was photographed. I know. I lost every job I had. I know. People at her school think I am dangerous. Claire's voice lowered. I know. Ethan looked at her. No, you know it happened. That landed harder. You do not know what it feels like to sit at a kitchen table and decide which bill gets paid because somebody with money decided your life was useful for a headline. Claire went still. Ethan immediately looked away. He regretted the cruelty before the sentence ended. But he did not take it back. Claire nodded. You're right. That surprised him. She continued. I do not know what that feels like. Her eyes stayed on his. I thought I understood ordinary life because I took the bus and worked for tips. Her voice tightened. I was wrong. Ethan looked down. Claire opened her bag. I can fix the financial damage. His eyes rose sharply. No. Ethan, no. I am not offering charity. Then what are you offering? Help. I do not need your money. You need income. I will find work. Your name is still circulating online. I know. I can make sure your rent is covered. Ethan pushed his chair back. I said no. Natalie quietly moved away from the table. Claire stood. I am trying to repair something that happened because of me. No. Ethan's voice hardened. It happened because of Grant. Claire stopped. Ethan pointed toward the door. You want to help me tell the truth? I will. Not through some company spokesperson. I will not. Not anonymously. I said I will. The anger left his face slowly. Claire looked exhausted now. Not like Mia after a night shift. Different. As if the weight she carried had simply changed clothes. Ethan looked at her. Why did you really come here? Claire could have answered with strategy, legal exposure, public statement, corporate responsibility. Instead, she said, because I was afraid. Ethan's expression shifted. Claire looked down at her hands. Not of Grant. She took a breath. Of becoming Claire Bennett again. Ethan said nothing. When I was Mia, nobody wanted a contract from me. Nobody wanted access to my father. Nobody pretended to like me because my last name was useful. Her eyes returned to his. You did not even know who I was. I knew you made bad coffee. A small smile touched her face. It is terrible coffee. Finally, common ground. Natalie looked between them. I hate to interrupt whatever this is, but we have something. She pulled out a folder. Claire and Ethan sat. Natalie opened it. Grant Whitmore has a history. Inside were statements, emails, printed messages, a photograph of a woman named Rachel Monroe. She worked at the Fairmont downtown 3 years ago, Natalie said. Grant was a regular. Ethan read the first page. His face hardened. Natalie continued. Repeated unwanted contact. Messages after she refused him. Threats about her job. Claire looked at the documents. Did she report it? To management. What happened? Grant complained about her service. She was reassigned. Claire's mouth tightened. Of course. There are 2 other women. Will they testify? Privately, yes. Publicly, not yet. Ethan looked up. Why not? Natalie gave him a tired look. You know why. Ethan did. Money, fear, jobs, families. The exact machinery grinding over his life now. Natalie's phone buzzed. She checked the screen. I need to take this. She stepped into the hall. Claire and Ethan remained alone. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Ethan noticed something clipped inside Claire's open bag. A small black device. He pointed. What is that? Claire looked down. Her expression changed. She pulled it free. A prototype. For what? Workplace safety. Ethan stared at it. Claire turned the device over in her hand. It records encrypted audio during test shifts. His eyes narrowed. You wore that at the diner? Most nights. That night, Claire looked at him. I think so. The office door opened. Natalie walked back in. Marcus Hill finally called. The truck driver? Yes. He wants to give a full statement. Claire looked from Natalie to the device in her hand. Natalie noticed. What is that? Claire stood. Something I should have remembered days ago. 2 hours later, they were inside a secure Bennett Systems development room. An engineer sat at a terminal. Daniel stood near the door. Ethan remained beside Natalie, visibly uncomfortable beneath the bright corporate lights. The engineer searched archived test files. Claire watched dates move across the screen. Then he stopped. There. A file opened. Timestamp. 1:11 a.m. Blue Lantern Diner. Claire felt her heartbeat in her throat. The engineer pressed play. Coffee cups, distant rain. Grant's voice. That your real name? Claire closed her eyes. Then her own voice. I'm working. Grant again. Sit down. A few seconds later came the words none of them needed to imagine anymore. Let go of me. Silence in the room. The recording continued. A second request. Then a third. Then Ethan. Calm, clear. She asked you to let go. Nobody moved. The entire confrontation played through the speakers. Every warning, every threat, every moment Grant's edited story had removed. When the recording ended, the room remained silent. Natalie looked at Claire, then at Ethan. "This changes everything." Ethan stared at the dark speaker. "No." Natalie looked at him. Ethan's face was unreadable. "It just proves what happened." Claire watched him. For Ethan, that distinction mattered. The truth had never changed, only the number of people willing to believe it. Later that evening, Daniel Price sat across from Walter Bennett in the chairman's private study. A file rested between them. Walter did not open it. "You investigated him." "You asked me to." "And?" Daniel leaned back. "Army Ranger. Honorable discharge, combat injury, consistent PTSD treatment. One arrest 5 years ago after his wife's death. I know about the arrest. Nothing since. Financial problems. Plenty. Debts. Normal ones." Walter looked irritated. "Everyone has leverage." Daniel did not answer. Walter finally opened the file. Inside were photographs. Ethan carrying groceries with Sophie. Ethan repairing a wheelchair ramp at a veteran's home. Ethan kneeling beside Rebecca's grave. Walter looked up. "What is this?" "He volunteers 1 Saturday a month." "For what organization?" "None." Walter frowned. "He finds veterans who need repairs and does the work himself." Daniel slid another page across the desk. "Grant offered him $75,000. I heard." He tore up the agreement. Walter's eyes moved over the paper. Daniel continued. "He lost almost every source of income." "Then he is either principled or stupid." "Could be both." Walter looked at him. Daniel almost smiled. Then his expression became serious. "I spent 20 years working around people who are good at looking honorable when somebody important is watching." He tapped the file once. "Cole is the same man when nobody is watching." Walter leaned back. "Everybody wants something." Daniel looked toward Sophie's photograph clipped inside the file. "He wants his daughter safe." Walter said nothing. Daniel stood. At the door, he stopped. "For what it is worth, your daughter was right about him." Walter's eyes remained on the file long after Daniel left. Across the city, Ethan stood outside Natalie's office preparing to leave. Claire walked with him to the sidewalk. The city had grown cold. Traffic hissed over damp pavement. For a moment, they stood beneath the pharmacy light like they had stood beneath diner lights for months. Only now everything between them had names. Claire Bennett, Ethan Cole, money, fear, trust. Ethan put his hands into his coat pockets. "I am still mad at you." Claire nodded. "You should be. That does not mean I think you caused this." "I know." He looked at her. "Do you?" Claire met his eyes. "I am learning." Ethan glanced toward the black car waiting at the curb, then back at her. "You were easier when you were just bad coffee." Claire smiled. "You were easier when you were just the customer who refused free refills. I never refused them. You emotionally rationed them. Different thing." For the first time since the photographs of Sophie appeared, Ethan laughed. It lasted only a second. Claire heard it anyway. Then he became serious again. "Tell the truth, Claire." "Not Mia. Claire, she felt the difference." "I will." Ethan nodded once, then turned toward his truck. Claire remained on the sidewalk as he walked away, no longer hidden behind a plastic name tag and no longer able to pretend that knowing the truth was enough. By 9 the next morning, the truth had a voice. That did not mean anyone was ready to hear it. Natalie stood inside a conference room at Bennett Systems with the recovered audio playing through a pair of studio speakers. Claire sat at the far end of the table. Daniel stood near the windows. Walter remained beside the door with his arms folded. Ethan had refused the leather chair offered to him and chosen a plain seat against the wall instead. Grant's voice filled the room. "Sit down." Then Claire. "I'm working." Another pause. "Let go of me," Grant answered. Then Claire again. "Let go." Her third request came sharper. "Let go of me now." The recording continued until Ethan's voice entered. Calm, controlled, no shouting, no threat. "She asked you to let go." Walter stared at the speaker as though he could see the diner through it. When the file ended, Natalie stopped the playback. Nobody spoke. Ethan broke the silence. So we release it. Walter looked at him. It is not that simple. Ethan's expression did not change. Sounds pretty simple. The recording belongs to Bennett Systems. Claire turned toward her father. It belongs to the truth. Walter ignored the remark. There are legal considerations, privacy questions, corporate exposure. Grant's attorneys will challenge authentication. They will challenge collection. They will challenge Claire's reasons for wearing the device. Natalie nodded. They can challenge all of it. Walter looked at her. And they can lose. She tapped the folder in front of her. The file has a continuous timestamp. The system log confirms the device was active before Grant entered the diner. We have a witness who independently supports the sequence. We have photographs of Claire's wrist taken by police. We have the original security footage showing Ethan only approached after the interaction had already started. Walter glanced toward Ethan. Natalie continued. The audio does not need to prove everything by itself. It needs to exist alongside everything else. Daniel stepped forward. We also traced the surveillance company. Claire's eyes lifted. To Grant. To a consulting firm retained by one of his investment entities. Walter's face hardened. How direct? Direct enough that nobody reasonable will call it coincidence. Daniel placed several documents on the table. Payment authorization, internal request, expense code. Natalie picked up the first page. What did the request say? Daniel answered quietly. Subject vulnerability assessment. Ethan gave a cold laugh. My daughter is 8. No one replied. He looked at Walter. Still complicated. Walter met his eyes. Yes. Ethan stood. Claire knew the movement now. Not explosive, not careless. The opposite. Every part of him became more controlled when anger was strongest. My daughter was followed because I would not sign a piece of paper. Walter said nothing. Ethan pointed toward the speaker. You have the recording. Then toward Daniel's documents. You have proof they followed Sophie. Then toward Natalie. You have women saying Grant did this before. His voice remained quiet. What exactly are we waiting for? Walter's jaw tightened. For a way to act that does not turn one man's misconduct into a crisis for 17,000 employees. Claire leaned forward. And how many employees do you think are watching what we do? Walter looked at her. This company does not exist inside a morality play. No, Claire stood. It exists in the real world. She walked toward the conference table. In the real world, one of our most influential investors assaulted an employee because he believed she had no power. Walter's eyes narrowed. You're not an employee. I was that night. You are the chief executive. He did not know that. Claire's voice sharpened. That is why it matters. Walter glanced toward the windows. Claire continued. He behaved one way when he thought I was useful to him and another when he thought I carried coffee for a living. Her hand rested against the table. We sell workplace safety systems. We tell companies they need cultures where people can report harassment without fear. We charge them for the software. She looked around the room. What does that software mean if we protect Grant because protecting him is convenient? Walter's face remained unreadable. Ethan watched Claire. He remembered Mia behind the counter, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair tied back, a coffee pot in one hand. That woman had seemed real to him. For days after learning her name, he had wondered whether Mia had been only another performance. Watching Claire stand across from her father now, he began to understand something. Mia had not been the disguise. Maybe this was. Walter picked up the surveillance request. I want everything verified independently. Natalie nodded. Already happening. I want the audio authenticated. Already happening. I want the other witnesses interviewed by outside counsel. Scheduled. Walter looked at Claire. And until then, no public statement. Claire stared at him. How long? 48 hours. No. Claire. Grant has had days. Walter's voice hardened. 48 hours is not cowardice. No, but silence becomes useful to the person causing harm very quickly. Walter stepped closer. You think leadership is moving the second your emotions tell you to move? Claire shook her head. I think leadership is knowing when waiting becomes a decision. The room went still. Walter looked at Ethan, perhaps expecting support. Ethan gave none. Finally, Walter said, 24 hours. Claire did not smile. 24. The meeting ended. Ethan left first. Claire followed him into the hallway. Ethan. He stopped. She approached. I am sorry. For what this time? For asking you to sit through people discussing your life like a risk model. He looked through the glass wall into the conference room. Your world likes meetings. Very much. I noticed. Claire watched him. Are you all right? No. The answer came without hesitation. She nodded. Good. He looked at her. Claire clarified. Not good that you're not all right? A little embarrassment entered her voice. Good that you did not tell me you're fine. Ethan almost smiled. I am learning. So am I. His phone vibrated. He checked the screen, a message from Sophie's school. His face changed. Claire felt her stomach tighten. What is it? Nothing. Ethan. He read it again. Someone called the school asking what time Sophie gets released. Claire went cold. Who? They don't know. Daniel appeared behind them. Give me the phone. Ethan handed it over. Daniel read the message and immediately called someone. His voice became clipped and professional. Move the second team to the school. Nobody approaches the child without clearance from Cole or the principal. Ethan stared at him. Second team. I put security near the school after the first photographs. You did what? Discreetly. I did not ask you to. No. Daniel put away his phone. Claire did. Ethan turned toward her. Claire did not apologize. Be angry later. He looked at her. That seems to be your answer to everything. Right now, yes. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. I need to get Sophie. I'll come. No. Claire stopped. He softened the answer slightly. She has had enough strangers around her. I'm not a stranger. The words left Claire before she could stop them. Ethan looked at her. For 1 second, neither moved. Claire broke eye contact first. To her, I mean. I know what you meant. Daniel handed the phone back. I'll drive you. Ethan shook his head. I have my truck. Your truck is parked 3 blocks away. How do you know that? Daniel looked at him. It's literally my job. Ethan exhaled. Fine. Claire watched them leave. She felt more useless standing inside her own company than she had ever felt carrying dishes at the diner. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then answered. Claire Bennett. Grant's voice came through. We should talk. Her body became still. You're talking. Privately. No. Claire. She heard him breathe. His confidence had returned. It sounded polished again, controlled, exactly like the man she had known before the diner. I regret what happened. Claire looked through the window at the elevator Ethan had just entered. Which part? All of it. The part where you grabbed me? Silence. Or the part where Ethan stopped you? Grant's voice cooled. I had been drinking. That explains your blood alcohol level. It does not explain your choices. I made a mistake. You made several. I am trying to resolve this. You mean control it. Grant ignored that. I will withdraw the civil action against Cole. Claire said nothing. I will make sure his employment problems disappear. Her grip tightened around the phone. Disappear. His former employers will take him back. If they don't, I know people who will hire him. And his daughter, Grant paused. Whatever private firm became involved went too far. Claire closed her eyes. Whatever private firm. I did not authorize anyone to frighten a child. You authorized a vulnerability assessment on Ethan. Another silence. Grant changed direction. This is becoming destructive for everyone. No. Claire walked toward the windows. It became destructive when you decided a waitress could not tell you no. Grant exhaled. We have known each other for years. No. You knew Claire Bennett. Her voice became quieter. You met me at the diner. Grant said nothing. Claire looked down at the streets. People moved between buildings, tiny from this height. Invisible faces. You did not like me very much when you thought I made $11 an hour. This is ridiculous. Is it, you know how these situations get distorted? I heard the recording. Grant's voice stopped. Claire continued. Every word. The silence became different. Not strategic. Fear. You have audio? Yes. Claire. Do not call me again. Listen to me. No. If that recording becomes public, this turns into something nobody can control. Claire thought about Ethan at his kitchen table. Sophie outside school. Rachel Monroe losing a job after reporting Grant. The other women Natalie had found. I think that is exactly what scares you. She ended the call. That afternoon, Ethan sat in his truck outside Sophie's school. He watched children leave in small groups. Parents stood beneath umbrellas near the entrance. Daniel's security people were somewhere nearby. Ethan could not identify them. That irritated him. It also helped him breathe. Sophie appeared through the doors carrying her backpack. She saw the truck and waved. Ethan waved back. For 10 seconds, everything felt normal. Then another parent noticed him. The woman looked away quickly. Ethan saw it. Sophie did too. She climbed inside. Hi. Hi. She buckled herself in. Can we get fries? We have food at home. That is not what I asked. Ethan looked at her. A smile finally came. Maybe. They drove. After several blocks, Sophie spoke again. Mrs. Turner called me into her office today. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Why? She asked if I felt safe. His chest tightened. What did you say? Yes. Okay. Then she asked if I was scared of you. Ethan's hands went still on the steering wheel. Sophie watched him. I told her no. He swallowed. Okay. I told her you're scared of spiders. I am not scared of spiders. You make me kill them. That is delegation. She smiled. Ethan did not. Dad. Yeah. Are we going to move? The question hit harder than the school message. Why would we move? I heard you talking to Mrs. Alvarez about money. Ethan glanced at her. When? Yesterday. You were supposed to be doing homework. I can do homework and listen. That is a terrible skill. Are we? Ethan pulled into a small park and stopped near the empty basketball court. He turned off the engine. Sophie waited. Ethan had spent years deciding how much truth a child could carry. He had never found a reliable answer. I don't know. She looked down at her backpack. Our apartment is small. I know. I don't care. Ethan felt his throat tighten. I care. You said homes are people, not rooms. He closed his eyes briefly. Of course she remembered that. Rebecca had said it first. Years ago, back when Sophie was small enough to fall asleep on Ethan's chest. He looked at his daughter. We are okay. Is that true? He hesitated. Sophie noticed. Ethan hated that she had become good at reading pauses. We are going to be okay. That answer seemed to satisfy her slightly more. She reached into her backpack. I made something. She pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. Ethan opened it. A drawing. A man stood in the center. Large square shoulders, brown hair, blue shirt. Beside him was a smaller girl. On the other side stood a woman with yellow hair holding a coffee pot. Ethan stared. Who is this? Sophie pointed. You. I gathered that. Me. Okay. And Mia. Ethan's eyes moved to the woman. Sophie frowned. Is her name really Claire? Yeah. That's weird. Why, she looks like a Mia. Ethan laughed. Sophie leaned against the seat. Is she rich? Very. Like Mrs. Alvarez rich. Ethan looked at her. Mrs. Alvarez has coupons taped to her refrigerator. She has 2 TVs. Claire has more money than Mrs. Alvarez. Sophie thought. Does she have a trampoline? I don't know. Then what is the point? Ethan folded the drawing carefully. The simplicity of the question almost hurt. He wondered how long Sophie could hold on to a world where wealth was measured in trampolines. His phone rang. Natalie. He answered. Ethan, her voice was serious. I need you at my office. Why? Rachel Monroe is here. An hour later, Rachel sat across from Ethan. She was 32, dark hair, gray sweater, hands wrapped around a paper cup she had not touched. Natalie sat beside her. Claire arrived shortly afterward. Rachel looked at Claire. Recognition passed across her face. You are her. Claire sat down. Yes. Rachel laughed nervously. Sorry, I just saw the news. You do not need to apologize. Rachel looked toward Ethan. And you're him. Ethan nodded. Rachel's eyes filled. She looked down. I wish somebody had done that for me. Nobody spoke. Rachel took a breath. Grant used to stay at the hotel where I worked. Her fingers tightened around the cup. The first time he made comments, I ignored him. The second time he touched me. Ethan's jaw tightened. Rachel continued. I reported it. What happened? Claire asked. Rachel gave a tired smile. My manager told me Grant was one of the hotel's most valuable guests. Claire looked away. He said I had probably misunderstood. Rachel swallowed. 2 weeks later, I was moved to daytime shifts. I lost almost half my tips. Natalie placed a hand near Rachel's, not touching her. Rachel continued. Then Grant started texting me. How did he get your number? Ethan asked. The hotel. Claire's face hardened. Rachel looked at her. I stopped answering. She laughed without humor. He told me I should be careful about making powerful people feel embarrassed. Ethan looked at the table. The exact same mechanism. Different woman, different room, same man. Rachel wiped beneath one eye. I signed something later. A settlement, Claire asked. Rachel nodded. I needed the money. No judgment entered Ethan's face. Rachel noticed. They offered enough to cover my mother's medical bills. Ethan looked at her. You do not have to explain. Rachel stopped. He continued. You did what you needed to do. Rachel's eyes filled again. I thought signing meant it was over. She looked at Claire. Then I saw what happened to him. Her eyes moved to Ethan. And I saw his daughter. Rachel placed her phone on the table. I kept everything. Messages, voicemails, screenshots, date. Natalie looked at the screen. Are you willing to make a statement? Rachel closed her eyes. Fear showed plainly now. Claire knew that fear. Not from the diner. From years inside rooms where powerful people could change lives with a sentence. Rachel opened her eyes. Yes? That evening, another woman agreed. Then another. Not publicly, not yet. But the pattern gained shape. Grant did not have one bad night. He had spent years believing silence could be purchased one person at a time. The next morning, Walter entered Claire's office holding the independent authentication report. She looked up. Well, the audio is genuine. Claire waited. The surveillance documents are genuine. Good. Walter closed the door. I still think a private resolution is possible. Claire stared at him. You heard Rachel. I did. You saw the messages. Yes. And you still want private. Walter placed the report on her desk. I want control. Claire slowly stood. That is the same thing Grant wants. Walter's face hardened. Do not compare me to him. Then stop using his language. He took a breath. Claire, if we make this public tomorrow, Grant's fund may liquidate its positions. Partners will panic. Reporters will start reviewing every Bennett relationship he has touched. Contracts could stall. People who had nothing to do with this could lose jobs. Claire walked around the desk. And if we do not, Walter said nothing. We tell every employee exactly what their safety is worth. She stood in front of him. We tell them policies matter until the person breaking them has enough money. Walter's voice lowered. Do you think I built this company by treating every conflict like a test of personal purity? No. Claire's answer came quickly. I think you built it by knowing which risks mattered. Walter's eyes narrowed. Claire continued. This one matters. You are willing to gamble the company. I am willing to protect what the company claims to be. Those are not the same thing. They should be. Walter looked at his daughter for a long time. Then he walked toward the door. Claire spoke before he reached it. You spent my entire childhood teaching me leadership meant making difficult decisions. Walter stopped. It does. Claire looked at him. No, you taught me how to make difficult decisions when somebody else paid the price. He turned slowly. Claire's voice softened. I am not asking Ethan to pay for this anymore. Walter said nothing. Then he left. That night, Ethan sat alone at his kitchen table. Sophie was asleep. The apartment was quiet. The stack of bills remained beside the refrigerator. Natalie had helped him delay some payments. One landlord phone call had bought him another week. Another company had declined his application that afternoon after what they called a routine background search. Ethan opened his laptop. The settlement agreement still existed in his email. Grant's attorney had sent an updated version. The amount was now $100,000. Ethan stared at it, then at Sophie's bedroom door. 100,000. Numbers behave differently when you were afraid for your child. Pride became expensive. Principles did too. He opened the agreement, read the first page, the second. His phone rang. Claire. He almost let it go, then answered, "Hey, you sound terrible." "Thank you. May I come over?" Ethan looked at the agreement. "Why?" "Because Natalie told me you received another offer." He closed his eyes. "She talks too much." "She is your lawyer." "Still," Claire paused. "Ethan." He rubbed his forehead. "Fine." 20 minutes later, someone knocked. Ethan opened the door. Claire stood alone. No Daniel. No driver visible. She held a paper bag. "What is that?" "Food. I have food. Do you—" He looked toward the kitchen. A box of cereal sat on the counter. Claire looked at it too. "Move." Ethan stepped aside. She walked in. Very CEO. "I have been told." She opened the bag. Soup, sandwiches, 2 slices of pie from the Blue Lantern. Ethan stared. "You went there. I know people. You work there." "Exactly." They sat at the kitchen table. Claire saw the open settlement agreement on the laptop. She did not mention it immediately. Ethan ate half the sandwich before speaking. "I might sign." Claire remained still. "I know." "You are not going to tell me not to—" "No." He looked at her. "Why?" "Because it is not my daughter being followed." Ethan stared at the table. Claire continued, "I want you to fight." But I do not get to ask Sophie to carry the cost." He exhaled slowly. "I can handle people hating me." Claire listened. "I can handle losing jobs." His voice roughened. "I have lost things before." He looked toward Sophie's room. "I cannot handle her paying for something I did." Claire's eyes softened. "You protected somebody. I know. You did not cause this. I know. Then stop saying it like you committed a crime." Ethan looked at her. "I chose to get involved." "Yes. And every choice has a price." Claire leaned closer. "That does not make every price fair." He rubbed both hands over his face. "I am tired, Claire." "I know." "No." He looked at her. "You know it happened." A faint smile touched her mouth. He realized he had thrown his own sentence back at himself. "Fair." Claire sat quietly. Ethan looked at the settlement again. "You want to know the worst part?" "What?" "For about 10 seconds when I saw the number, I felt relieved." Claire's expression did not change. "Why is that the worst part?" "Because I hate that he found a number that made me think. Thinking is not surrender." It felt like it. Claire reached across the table. She stopped before touching his hand, then waited. Ethan looked down at the small distance between their fingers. He moved his hand closer. Claire covered it with hers. Nothing about the gesture was dramatic. That made it feel more dangerous than anything else between them. Ethan looked at her. Claire spoke softly. "The night at the diner, you told Grant something." "What?" "That when somebody is being hurt and you can stop it, it becomes your business." Ethan remembered. Claire's thumb moved once across his knuckles. "I hated that sentence." He raised an eyebrow. "That's encouraging." "Because it followed me home." She looked toward the laptop. "You taught me something I did not want to know." Ethan waited. Knowing the truth is not the same as standing up for it. He looked at her. Claire continued. "I spent days trying to help you without risking my name." Her voice tightened. "I thought I was being careful." "You were scared." "Yes." She did not hide from the word. Ethan looked at their hands. Claire said, "I am still scared." "Of Grant?" "No." "Your father?" "A little." That made him smile. Claire smiled too, then became serious. "I am scared that when I do this publicly, I cannot control what happens." Ethan leaned back. "Welcome to ordinary life." She laughed softly. "Apparently." The sound faded. Ethan closed the settlement document. He did not sign it. He did not delete it either, Claire noticed. She understood. This decision belonged to him. At 10 the next morning, Bennett Systems held its quarterly board session. The main conference room occupied the 42nd floor. Glass walls faced the rivers. A polished table ran nearly the length of the room. Board members arrived carrying tablets and coffee. Legal advisors took seats against the wall. Grant Whitmore entered at 9:53. Perfect suit, perfect tie, no visible panic. He greeted two directors, shook Walter's hand, then saw Claire. She stood beside her chair. Their eyes met. Grant smiled. Claire. Grant. He sat. Ethan was not in the room. That had been his choice. This is her fight now, he had told Natalie. Instead, he waited in a smaller conference room downstairs with Sophie and Mrs. Alvarez. Sophie colored at the table. Ethan stared at the muted television mounted on the wall. Upstairs, Walter called the meeting to order. They moved through the first agenda items: financial review, operational update, supply chain discussion. Grant relaxed slightly. Then Walter closed the folder in front of him. Before we continue, there is a matter concerning board integrity and corporate conduct. Grant's expression changed by less than an inch. Claire stood. Walter looked at her. The room became silent. Claire walked toward the display at the end of the table. 4 months ago, I temporarily removed myself from the public operations of Bennett Systems. Several directors exchanged glances. I did it because I believed this company had become too comfortable discussing workers we rarely listened to. She looked around the room. I worked under another name. Grant's face hardened. At restaurants, service businesses, distribution sites? Claire pressed a control. A photograph of the Blue Lantern appeared. I wanted to understand how people behave when they do not know who I am. She looked directly at Grant. I learned. Nobody moved. Several weeks ago, while working a night shift at this diner, a man grabbed my wrist after I refused to sit with him. Grant leaned forward. His attorney whispered something. Claire continued. I told him to release me 3 times. Grant spoke. Claire, this is not the appropriate forum. Walter looked toward him. You'll have an opportunity to respond. Grant leaned back. Claire pressed another control. The lights dimmed slightly. Audio filled the room. Grant's voice. Sit down, Claire's. I'm working. Then let go of me. The first request. The room became still. The second played, then the third. One director lowered her eyes. Another looked directly at Grant. Then Ethan's voice. She asked you to let go. Grant's attorney shifted. The recording continued. Mason moving toward Ethan. The struggle. Grant's final threat. You ruined your life. Claire stopped the playback. Silence. Grant stood. This recording was made without my consent. Natalie rose from a chair near the wall. The recording has been authenticated by 2 independent forensic laboratories. Questions regarding admissibility can be addressed in the appropriate venue. Grant looked at her. And you are Natalie Reyes, counsel for Ethan Cole. Grant's eyes hardened. Claire changed the screen. The surveillance photographs appeared. Sophie outside school, Sophie outside dance class. A murmur moved through the room. Claire spoke. When Ethan refused a settlement requiring his silence, a private intelligence firm retained through an entity connected to Grant's fund began documenting his 8-year-old daughter. Grant's face reddened. I did not authorize harassment of a child. Daniel placed documents in front of the board members. Claire answered. You authorized a vulnerability assessment. That is standard legal preparation. Of an 8-year-old. Grant's attorney stood. I strongly recommend everyone stop making statements that may expose this company to litigation. Walter looked at him. Sit down. The attorney stared. Walter repeated it. Sit down. He did. Claire changed the screen again. No photographs this time. Names. Rachel Monroe. 2 additional women whose identities remained protected. Natalie spoke. These individuals have provided sworn statements describing conduct consistent with the diner incident. One has supplied preserved messages and voicemail records. Grant shook his head. This is absurd. Claire looked at him. No. Her voice was quiet. A coordinated attack is what happened to Ethan after he protected me. Grant pointed toward her. You are allowing personal emotion to compromise your judgment. Claire did not move. For years you sat in rooms like this because you believed everyone here understood power the same way you did. Grant laughed bitterly. You think your father built this company on feelings? Claire looked toward Walter. No. Then back at Grant. But I know exactly what you thought when you saw me wearing that uniform. Grant said nothing. You thought I had no power. His jaw tightened. Claire continued. And that is the person you really are. Walter stood. The movement silenced the room. He looked at Grant. I have spent my career believing difficult problems can be managed. Claire watched her father. Walter continued. Sometimes that belief becomes an excuse to manage the wrong thing. He glanced toward Sophie's photograph. We should have acted sooner. Claire's face changed. Walter looked at Grant again. Effective immediately, Bennett Systems is suspending all strategic relationships with your fund pending formal review. Grant's attorney rose again. Walter did not let him speak. Your access to Bennett facility systems and confidential material is revoked. Grant stared. You cannot do that. Walter's expression was almost calm. I just did. Grant looked around the table. You people understand what happens if my fund exits its positions. One director spoke from the far side. We understand. Grant turned. Another director closed the folder in front of him. Grant looked toward Walter. You are willing to burn millions over this, Walter answered slowly. No. He looked toward the audio system. You were. Grant's face lost color. Claire watched the moment arrive. The moment a man who had always measured rooms by leverage realized the room no longer moved for him. Security entered. Not police, not handcuffs, not spectacle. 2 Bennett security officers waited beside the door. Daniel stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, your access credentials have been disabled. I'll escort you out. Grant stared at Claire. This isn't over. Claire met his eyes. No. A beat. It isn't. Grant left. His attorney followed. The conference room remained silent for several seconds. Then Walter sat down. Claire looked toward her father. He looked older than he had that morning. Not weaker, simply less certain. Downstairs, Ethan's phone rang. Natalie. He answered. Yeah, it's done. Sophie looked up from her drawing. Ethan turned slightly away. What happened? Grant is out. Ethan closed his eyes. Natalie continued. The company is releasing a statement. We are providing evidence to investigators. Rachel has agreed to go public. Ethan opened his eyes. And Grant, he walked out the front door. Ethan was silent. Natalie seemed to understand. This is not a movie, Ethan. He looked at Sophie. I know. Evidence moves faster than courts sometimes slower. I know. We did what we could do today. Ethan nodded. Okay. Natalie paused. Claire did well. His eyes moved toward the elevator. Yeah. Sophie held up her paper. Is Mia coming down? Ethan looked at her. Claire. She still looks like a Mia. The elevator doors opened. Claire stepped out. She stopped when she saw Ethan and Sophie. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Sophie climbed down from the chair. She ran across the room. Claire barely had time to bend before Sophie wrapped both arms around her. Claire froze, then held her. Ethan stood slowly. Sophie pulled back. Did you win? Claire looked at Ethan. He almost smiled. Claire looked down at Sophie. We told the truth. Sophie frowned. That was not my question. Claire laughed. A real laugh, tired, shaken, alive. She looked at Ethan again. No. Her voice softened. I don't think anybody won. Ethan crossed the room. He stopped in front of her. You stood up. Claire held his gaze. So did you. No. Ethan glanced toward the elevator. Today was yours. Something passed between them. Not gratitude, not debt, not rescue. Recognition. For the first time since they met, neither of them was standing above or below the other. Sophie looked from one face to the other. Can we get fries now? Ethan blinked. Claire stared at her. Sophie folded her arms. I have been here for 3 hours. Ethan looked at Claire. She has a point. Claire nodded solemnly. Extremely compelling argument. Sophie grabbed Claire's hand, then Ethan's. She pulled both of them toward the door. Outside, the clouds had finally broken over Pittsburgh. Weak afternoon sunlight touched the windows of the towers and turned the rivers below into long strips of pale gold. Ethan stepped onto the sidewalk with Sophie between them. For the first time in weeks, no camera waited across the street. No stranger stood beside a parked car. No message arrived from an unknown number. Claire glanced at Ethan. He noticed. "What?" "Nothing. That is rarely true." She smiled. "I was thinking about the first time you walked into the diner." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You mean the first time I paid too much for terrible coffee?" "You left 50 cents. It was a statement. You came back the next night. The protest required persistence." Claire laughed. Sophie looked up at them. "You two are weird." Ethan nodded. "That is also true." They reached the corner. The pedestrian signal changed. Sophie stepped forward first, still holding both their hands. Ethan looked across at Claire. Claire looked back. Neither said anything. For once, silence did not belong to fear. They crossed the street together. 3 weeks later, the Blue Lantern Diner looked exactly the same. The neon sign still flickered over the front window. The coffee was still too bitter. The same ceiling vent rattled above the counter. For Ethan, that was strangely comforting. Some things survived scandal. Some things ignored headlines. Some things simply opened at 6 in the morning and closed whenever the last customer decided to leave. Ethan stepped through the door with Sophie beside him. She was wearing her school backpack and carrying a sheet of poster board almost as wide as her shoulders. The owner, Frank Delaney, looked up from the register. "There he is." Ethan stopped. "That sounds threatening." Frank came around the counter. He was a thick man in his 60s with a permanent coffee stain near the pocket of his shirt. He held out his hand. Ethan shook it. Frank did not let go immediately. "I should have said something that night." Ethan looked at him. Frank swallowed. "I saw enough." The diner seemed quieter. "I told myself the police would sort it out." Ethan nodded. Frank looked embarrassed. "That was cowardly." Ethan did not rescue him from the word. After a moment he said, "You are saying something now." Frank released his hand. "I put something up." He pointed toward the register. A small framed sign rested beside the pie case. "If someone needs help, we do not look away." Sophie read it twice. "I like it." Frank smiled at her. "That means it passed inspection." The bell above the entrance rang. Claire walked in carrying 2 coffees. Not in business clothes, not in her old waitress uniform. Jeans, a gray sweater, hair pulled back. She had returned to the Blue Lantern several times since the board meeting. At first people stared. Then Pittsburgh did what working cities often did with famous people who stayed long enough. It became bored. Claire placed 1 coffee in front of Ethan. He looked at the cup. "You brought coffee into a diner." "It is better coffee," Frank shouted from behind the counter. "I heard that." Claire smiled. "Good." Ethan took a sip. She was right. Sophie spread her poster across the booth. "I need opinions." Claire slid in beside her. The title at the top was written in thick blue marker. "What Courage Looks Like." Beneath it, Sophie had drawn several people. One was Ethan, one was Claire, one was Marcus, one was Rachel. There was even a drawing of Natalie holding what looked like an enormous stack of papers. Claire pointed. "Why does Natalie have flames coming out of her head?" She was angry. "That is accurate." Ethan studied the drawing of himself. "Why am I so wide?" Sophie looked at him. "Shoulders." "I see." Claire tried not to laugh. Sophie pointed at each figure. "Mrs. Turner said I have to explain why each person is brave." Claire leaned closer. "What are you going to say?" Sophie considered. Mr. Marcus was scared, but then he told the truth. Claire nodded. "Rachel, too." Sophie looked toward Ethan. "And Dad helped before he knew if anybody else would." Ethan lowered his coffee. Sophie's finger moved to Claire. "You were scared because everybody knew who you were." Claire's smile faded slightly. "That is true. But you still talked." Sophie sat back. "So they are all heroes." Ethan looked at her. "Even the people who were scared first?" Sophie shrugged. You can be scared and still do it. Claire and Ethan exchanged a glance. Sophie had somehow reduced weeks of fear lawyers, money, power, humiliation, and risk into one sentence. Then she frowned. I forgot Mrs. Alvarez. You can add her. I ran out of room. Claire moved Ethan's drawing slightly with one finger. We can make your dad narrower. Ethan stared at her. Do not touch the shoulders. Sophie laughed. At school that afternoon, Sophie stood in front of her class holding the poster. Mrs. Turner asked one final question. Which person in your project is the hero? Sophie looked at the drawings, then at the class. All of them. Mrs. Turner smiled. Why? Sophie answered simply. They just got brave at different times. That evening, Natalie called Ethan. He was standing in the kitchen washing dishes while Sophie did homework. I have good news. Ethan turned off the water. I could use some. The civil suit is gone. He was silent. Natalie continued. Completely withdrawn. What about the investigation? Still moving. Grant had not been arrested that day. No dramatic handcuffs. No crowd of reporters waiting outside a courtroom. Real consequences moved differently. Slower. More carefully. Investigators had interviewed Rachel. Then Marcus. Then Claire. Financial records from the private intelligence firm had been subpoenaed. 2 more women had contacted Natalie. Grant's fund had begun losing clients. Several partners resigned. His name disappeared from Bennett Systems materials. People who had once returned his calls within minutes had become harder to reach. Ethan listened, then asked, What about the people taking pictures of Sophie? Police believe they have enough to connect the assignment to Grant's office. Ethan closed his eyes. For weeks, that mattered more than everything else. Okay. Natalie's voice softened. You can breathe. Ethan looked towards Sophie. She sat at the table chewing the end of a pencil. I am working on it. 2 days later, 3 employers called Ethan. The medical equipment company offered his route back. The maintenance contractor apologized. Another company offered him a security position. Ethan thanked all of them. He accepted none. He did not know why yet. He only knew returning to the same life felt impossible. A week later, Walter Bennett asked to see him. Ethan nearly declined. Claire convinced him, not with pressure, with one sentence. He wants to apologize. Ethan looked at her. Your father apologizes. Rarely. Should I bring a camera? Claire smiled. Probably. Walter received Ethan in his private study. No board members, no attorneys. Daniel stood near the fireplace. Claire sat beside the window. Walter remained standing when Ethan entered. Mr. Cole. Ethan. Walter nodded. Ethan. They shook hands. Walter did not sit. I had you investigated. Ethan glanced toward Daniel. I figured. Walter looked surprised. Daniel is terrible at looking casual. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I disagree. You followed me to a cemetery. You noticed. You drive a black SUV. Daniel considered that. Fair. Claire looked away to hide a smile. Walter cleared his throat. I assumed you might be trying to position yourself for money. Ethan said nothing. I was wrong. Walter's voice became quieter. I do not say that often. I heard. Claire looked at her father. Walter ignored her. He gestured toward a folder on the table. I want you to look at something. Ethan did not touch it. What is it? A job. No. Walter blinked. You have not opened it. I know. Claire stood. Ethan. He looked at her. I am not taking a job because I helped your daughter. Claire's face changed. Walter walked closer. Good. Ethan looked back at him. Walter tapped the folder. Because I would not hire you for that. He opened it. Bennett Systems Workplace Intervention and Safety Initiative. Ethan read the title. Walter continued. We are building a program for companies that need more than software. Claire spoke. Training for harassment response, crisis intervention, de-escalation, bystander response, physical safety, Daniel added, and people who know the difference between controlling a situation and escalating it. Ethan looked at him. Daniel nodded toward the folder. You do. Claire stepped closer. You led people under pressure. Ethan looked down. You understand what panic does to a room. Daniel continued. You understand proportional force. Walter finished. And apparently you are difficult to buy. Ethan looked at him. That a qualification? In my experience, an increasingly rare one. Ethan finally sat. He read, Director of Intervention Training, salary, benefits, flexible schedule, travel limited when possible. He stopped at the number. It was more money than he had made in any single year since leaving the military. Ethan closed the folder. This still feels like charity. Claire sat across from him. Then make it harder. He looked at her. Excuse me. Negotiate. Walter leaned back slightly. Ethan looked at the folder again, then at Walter. Veterans. Walter waited. If you are building a training team, I want qualified veterans considered. Reasonable. Not as a publicity program. Agreed. Free training for small businesses that cannot afford corporate rates. Walter tilted his head. How free? Actually free. Claire smiled. Walter noticed. Anything else? Ethan thought. My schedule works around Sophie. Walter nodded. Done. Ethan looked suspicious. You are making this too easy. Walter extended his hand. I know when I am losing a negotiation. Ethan shook it. He started 2 weeks later. The first training session was held at the Blue Lantern. Claire wanted headquarters. Ethan refused. If people are going to learn how not to look away, start where people looked away. So managers, servers, warehouse supervisors, security staff, and human resources teams filled the diner after closing. Marcus sat near the back. Rachel sat near the front. Natalie leaned against the counter with a coffee she clearly regretted buying. Claire sat beside Sophie. Ethan stood near the booth where everything had started. He looked at the room. Most people think courage feels powerful. Nobody spoke. It usually does not. He moved slowly between the tables. Usually it feels inconvenient. Marcus lowered his eyes. It feels like your heart is beating too fast while your brain gives you 10 good reasons to stay seated. Ethan stopped. You do not have to win a fight. He glanced toward Sophie. You do not have to be the strongest person in the room. Claire watched him. Sometimes courage starts with one sentence. Ethan looked toward the empty booth. Let her go. Months passed. Grant eventually faced criminal charges related to harassment and witness intimidation. Civil claims followed. His investment firm lost major partners. Rachel testified. Other women joined her. Ethan followed the case without celebrating. He had no interest in revenge. He wanted Grant unable to do the same thing again. That was enough. Claire and Ethan changed more slowly. There was no sudden declaration, no perfect ending waiting outside a courthouse. There were dinners, arguments, school pickups. Claire helped Sophie build a small robot for science night. Ethan repaired the leaking faucet in Claire's apartment. She told him she could afford a plumber. He told her that was not the point. She asked what the point was. He said it was dripping. Claire learned that Ethan hated expensive restaurants because he could never understand why portions got smaller when prices increased. Ethan learned that Claire worked when she was anxious. Sophie learned both of these things and used them against them. One Sunday afternoon, they stood in a park overlooking Pittsburgh. Sophie was learning to ride without training wheels. Ethan ran beside her. Keep pedaling. Are you holding me? Yes. Claire watched from the path. You are lying to your child. Motivational parenting. Sophie kept riding. Ethan had already let go. She made it halfway around the path before realizing, Dad! Her bicycle swerved. Claire gasped. Sophie corrected. Then she laughed so loudly that people turned. She completed the circle and threw one hand into the air. Ethan and Claire cheered. Sophie stopped beside them. Did I do it? Ethan crouched. You did. Sophie looked at Claire, then at Ethan. Are you two getting married? Ethan coughed. Claire stared at her. That is a very direct question. Sophie shrugged. Dad says if something matters, you should not just sit there. Ethan closed his eyes. I regret everything I have taught you. Claire laughed. Then she reached for his hand. Ethan looked down. Her fingers closed around his. Months earlier, he had stood up for a waitress because she needed help. He had not known her name. He had not known her money. He had not known how deeply she would enter his life. Claire looked at him. What? Ethan shook his head. Nothing. She smiled. That is rarely true. He looked toward Sophie, writing another circle, then back at Claire. I was thinking the coffee was worth it. Claire laughed. The coffee was terrible. I know. He squeezed her hand. Still worth it. Across the city, the Blue Lantern's neon sign flickered on as evening settled over Pittsburgh. Beside the register, the framed message remained. If someone needs help, we do not look away. And in Ethan Cole's kitchen, there was only one work schedule on the refrigerator now. Beside it hung Sophie's drawing. 3 people, no capes, no titles, no names beneath them, just 3 figures holding hands.